It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Today's Ag Spotlight episode is sponsored by Energrow. Energrow's oilseed pressing system helps farmers crush their feed costs. The easy way to make fresh, homegrown, high-quality meal plus expeller pressed oil right on the farm. The fully automated Turnkey Crush Pro is easy to set up and run 24/7. To learn more, go to energrow.ca. Hi, and welcome to the North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today is the Vice President of Government Affairs at the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. He has more than 20 years of experience in natural resources, land use issues, and advocacy on behalf of the cattle industry. He's also spent 10 years helping to grow and manage a large real estate and ranch portfolio in Arizona, and his experience gives him a unique perspective on the challenges that producers face every day. I'd like to welcome Ethan Lane. Welcome, Ethan, and thank you so much for being here.
It's great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Great. So we'll get right into it. The Farm System Reform Act was introduced by Democrat Representative Ro Khanna in the House and Democratic Senator Cory in the Senate. And the legislation is designed to phase out large feedlots, give farmers the opportunity to transition to raising animals on pasture or crop production. It's supported by over 200 animal welfare, sustainable agriculture, environmental, and public health organizations. You've been vocal about your opposition to the Farm System Reform Act in the last 2 weeks. So can you give us some background on the bill and your stance on it?
You bet. And you did a really good job of laying out kind of, part of the concern, right? Is this is a bill that is really being pitched as an effort to help small family farmers and ranchers around the country. That's certainly the argument that's being made. It's coming from members of Congress, Ro Khanna from California and Cory Booker, who simply aren't traditionally people who look out for the best interests of small farmers and ranchers. And what they're asking to do, what they're seeking to do with this bill is really disrupt what has proven to be the most efficient, optimized cattle production system in the world. We produce the highest quality beef on the planet here in the U.S., and we do it with the lowest environmental footprint in the world. We do that because we have a couple key resources at our disposal. We have access to hundreds of millions of acres of purpose-built grazing land. That backbone of ranch country around the country from California all the way to Virginia, that allows us to graze these animals in a really efficient way that stores a lot of carbon in the soil and puts a lot of environmental benefit back into the ground while we're raising those cattle. Also allows us to transition to that feedlot phase for about 95% of our cattle supply here in the United States. And that optimized feedlot stop is where we really give our beef that distinctive flavor profile that consumers here and around the world really seek out. I mean, when we talk about the best beef in the world, what makes it so? I mean, it's the hand in hand. It's that fantastic grassland feeding, and then that grain finish that we apply. And it also has the benefit of reducing the resources that we consume and use to raise that product. If we had to finish all of those cattle on grass the entirety of their lifespan, we would be looking at a far larger environmental footprint than in that optimized system that we're using now. Now, that being said, there's a robust grass-fed market in the United States as well, and there's a certain segment of consumers that seek that out. We want to make sure those are all the options that are available for consumers, but simply put, the vast majority of what we produce follows that system. So, to initiate a piece of legislation that is ostensibly on behalf of small family farmers and ranchers that takes away one of the critical tools that they have to bring their animals to market is at best disingenuous, and is certainly not welcome help for any of our producers around the country.
Right. And so Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, Cory Booker, they're backing this. And to me, that says volumes about the direction that the bill will take us. And I don't necessarily think that is or could be good for farmers, but what do you think about that?
Well, anytime you have a piece of legislation that is aimed at removing agriculture, at eliminating agriculture's capabilities, ag should look at it with a little bit of suspicion, or a lot of suspicion. This bill sets out to buy out feedlots over 1,000 head by 2040, and like you said, direct them towards other ways of making a living. We see that in other areas as well. CRP ground that people are being paid to not utilize. We believe that agriculture is a benefit rather than a detractor. We believe that well-managed grazing systems are essential to combating climate change and reducing our carbon footprint. If you take that away, we lose. I mean, never mind the fact that we lose our productivity, we lose options for our producers. And right now, given the challenges we've had in the cattle markets, given the challenges we've had with leverage and pricing for producers, we want more options. We want more possibilities for how you can move your operation forward, different ways to add value in the supply chain. And so taking all those options away is really an additional headwind that we just don't need in the supply chain at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And the act, like you said, it'll prohibit construction of new large feedlots, expansion of those currently that are operating. It would require large feedlots to cease operation by, like you said, 2040. But it also establishes a voluntary debt forgiveness program, and that feedlot owners, they give them grants to pay off their debts to transition. Right. So how do you think that's going to be received by the cattle farmer?
Well, I don't know a whole lot of cattle farmers and ranchers that are saying, gosh, I wish somebody would take me out of business. Right. I mean, sure, we'd all like to have less leveraged, issues and debt obligations on our operations. And certainly that debt load and that escalating debt load is a challenge for producers across the spectrum, particularly at this point in the cattle cycle. We're all sort of waiting and hoping that turn in the cycle comes that we know we can expect every few years, where we kind of start to recapture the momentum and can make up some ground on prices, because that debt starts to build, and that's a challenge. And there are some things that are peppered through this bill that kind of resonate on some of those topics. There's some language on product of the USA labeling in there, which is something that we've been advocating for some reform in that area as well. That's by design, right? Oh gosh, this bill does a lot of different things, but you can't take your eye off the ball. I mean, the main deliverable in there is eliminating the feedlot system by 2040. And putting a few items in there to kind of make the medicine go down doesn't make it a bill worth looking at. It just makes it a sophisticated attack on our industry. Right.
Yeah. And the Animal Welfare Institute, they promote their support for the bill. They've said the current model of industrial animal agriculture that dominates our food system is unsustainable. So how do we, as the ag industry, how do we answer that?
Well, I always bristle when someone talks about industrial agriculture, right? Because when it's a mom and a dad and a daughter running a feedlot, whether it's 1,000 head or 20,000 head, and that's a family business. You've been on those operations, so have I. That's hardly an industrial site, right?
Yeah,
it's an agricultural operation, they all look and feel like what we know to be agriculture. Right. We're feeding people at scale. We're feeding the world on these landscapes and using these technologies and resources. And we're getting better and better at doing that every day. So to take an industry that is 95% those family operations, those multi-generational family operations, and paint them as somehow being a big, dirty industrial company is sort of an indication of how they feel about the people that they're ostensibly trying to help, right? Because the ratios just don't add up. I mean, our average member or average producer in this country has 40 head of cattle. That's the size of the average cattle producer in this country. And they grow those cattle and feed them into a system that gets them to market.
Right.
That's how we, excuse me, that's how we do what we do in this country.
Yeah.
So it's really one of those things where you got to look below the surface and make sure you're asking some serious questions about the intent of some of these pieces of legislation, and you got to consider the source too. Quite frankly, we have a really bountiful array of advocates for the cattle industry on Capitol Hill. I was just up on the Hill this morning talking to some members of Congress, and cattle country is blessed to have a lot of members that really care about what happens to our producers. They care about that end product. They care about the land that we work. None of them are associated with this bill, and that should tell you something right off the bat.
For sure. And last week you gave a response to the bill, and you stated that the contrast between the two proposals that were put forward, saying that the second is a kind of broad, jumbled mess that you get when you're more focused on Twitter and talking points than the sound legislating that rural Americans need. So can you elaborate more on what you meant with that?
You bet. I mean, I don't think anybody in 2021 is unaware of the influence of social media on the conversation.
Yeah.
Information gets distorted, messages get twisted. People can manipulate those environments. This effort and some of the groups that are supporting it very much look and feel like what we call astroturf in the political business, right? It's by design supposed to sort of deceive. And so if you're taking talking points from some of these organizations that exist online, that exist to misinform and to derail the real messages that agriculture is trying to get out there about our good work and about our benefits to the environment. This is what you get. You hear those talking points throughout the language in the bill, and you hear it in how they've pitched the bill, right? You said it, industrial agriculture. I mean, that's terminology that comes from people who want to end animal agriculture in this country.
Yeah, they're thinking concrete and fumes, right? Well, that's not what it is. It's birds and sunshine.
Exactly. There's imagery. And there are people in this town that have made an entire career out of not what you say, but how you say it. And those words matter, because when an American goes to the grocery store and looks at the meat case and is deciding what to feed their family that night, those people who want to end animal agriculture are trying to get those messages across, so that, gosh, it's in the back of my head, I'm buying a dirty product. I'm buying, industrialized food. And we know the reality of that is the furthest thing from the truth. First food my son ate, I have a 3.5-year-old, the first food he ate was beef. And to this day, it's what he demands on a daily basis around our house. And the reason that we feed it to him isn't just because I'm a lobbyist for the beef industry, because I know where it comes from, and I know how it's raised, and I know how safe it is for my family to eat. And that's the message we want to make sure we're getting across to the rest of the food buying public, not just in this country, but around the world. And when we see a bill like this using terminology like that, that's an obvious attempt to discredit the work of 800,000 cattle producers around the country.
Yeah, exactly. And the pandemic, it's really exposed a lot of the serious weaknesses in our supply chain and our food system. So in your opinion, is there a solution, and what is the solution? So
you're right. We really stress tested the system during COVID. And there's two ways to look at it. Considering the 45% decline in packing capacity, considering the fact that we saw 85 or something percent of restaurants close almost overnight around the country, and that shift that had to occur from the huge volume of beef going to food service, and then that secondary volume going to retail store shelves, and that pivot that had to occur in the system to get that product to store shelves. And certainly we all saw those pictures of empty meat cases, and thankfully a full case of Beyond Meat right next to it, because even in a pandemic, people can buy that. But that was really, I think, jarring for the American people. And then as we got those kind of wrinkles out of the system, even though there was a processing capacity shortage, we were never short of product. I mean, there was beef moving through the system, and Americans had to learn how to cook things they maybe weren't used to cooking. They were getting cuts that they weren't used to buying. Maybe they're used to buying a couple ribeyes every week, and then they were looking at a tri-tip. Now, I'm from Arizona. I know how to cook a tri-tip, but if you're not used to cooking that, you need to go figure out how to adapt to some of those things. But we really did kind of figure out some of those weaknesses in the system. Labor continues to be a really persistent challenge. In looking at, and certainly the packing industry has their own lobbyists and a lot of people that are working on those issues in particular. But for us representing our members, it's critically important that that segment of the chain function properly so that our animals have a place to go and be processed and put on store shelves as efficiently as possible. So that labor challenge continues to be one of the biggest ones we're facing. And, we know that that's not just an agriculture issue. It's not just a beef industry issue. We're seeing it throughout the economy right now. A lot of folks are still receiving a lot of federal benefits to stay home because of the pandemic. That is leading to a lot of challenges inside the supply chain as far as just getting workers to show up every day. I mean, we've seen the packers add quite a bit of starting salary money. I think we've gone from 15 or 16 bucks an hour starting to in some cases $21, $22, $23, trying to entice people to come back to work. Those are hard jobs. I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's not everybody that wants to go work in a packing plant 12 hours a day. But they're also good jobs. I mean, they're stable, good paying jobs. And that's a challenge we're going to have to get over to get that sort of workforce sustained and really back plugged in every day to keep that consistent supply going. We also are going to have to really start thinking about, that surging demand globally. We're in a herd contraction right now that economists have been predicting for a couple of years now, and it's being exacerbated by drought conditions in the West, the prices that producers are getting for their animals. So we're reducing our herd at a point where, boy, there's so much opportunity globally, and here in the U.S. we have surging demand. We want to feed that population. We don't want to have to shrink back that supply, but we need more hook space to do that. Even if we're fully staffed, we're short of hook space to really get that product moved through the system. I keep equating it to a dumbbell. We have, a 20-pound weight on one side with a really large supply of high quality market ready cattle. And then we have a tight pipeline in the middle to get them through. And we have that huge pent up demand on the other side. And that is really leading to kind of a worst case scenario for our producers because, there's a high beef cutout value on one side, and everyone in the industry is very well aware of that. And very low prices for our producers, far under what they should be receiving for producing such a great product. Hook space is going to solve some of that. Better product differentiation in the market is going to solve some of that. That's why we've been so focused on product of the USA right now. Right. Product can be labeled product of the USA simply by passing through an FSIS inspected facility. It's agnostic as to origin. I think people get confused about that. It's simply FSIS saying this was processed in an FSIS inspected facility. So we're asking USDA to look at that and revise that label so that it's more in line with consumer expectations of what's in the package. Right. And that's going to free up some room for more use of process verified programs at USDA. That functionality exists already, but it's really disincentivized by that competition from those kind of easy button product of the USA labels that can be applied by the retailers and the packers now. We want to drive more business to those source verified programs because that's where our producers are going to be able to really take a hand in creating some value added labels that are true marketing labels and that are going to truly deliver some value back to them at the ranch level. Consumers are telling us what they want. Go to your grocery store. There's local beef. If I'm here in Virginia, we have MVP beef. We have a couple different local retailers that are processing beef locally and selling it, and it's trading at a couple dollars higher than just graded product in the grocery store. Consumers are responding to that. They like the idea of buying a product from 100 miles down the road. Diversifying that packing capacity and allowing more opportunities for niche labeling is going to give our producers more hand and more leverage in that conversation to make sure that they're deriving that value. And it's also going to spread that load around a little bit and give us more options for moving that product through the system. Right.
Yeah. I can definitely stand behind that for sure. Yeah. And that's what you said even before is that they're mixing up really good ideas with these really bad ideas and trying to push it all through at the same time. Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's just pretty crazy.
It's par for the course in Washington, unfortunately.
Yeah. So is there anything we as the industry, the people in the industry, is there anything we can do to help?
So we have done a better job. One of my biggest frustrations for a long time in agriculture is that we don't always, we tell each other our story really well. Mm-hmm. We do a really good job of talking to each other. We've traditionally done a really bad job of talking to anybody else. and really getting that message out beyond our own gate, right? Mm-hmm. We've done a better job of that during the pandemic than I think at any time that I can remember. We have Congress's attention. We have the public's attention. We've seen more national media coverage of this than we've seen in a very long time. We need to take advantage of that. We need to make sure that when members of Congress are out touring in their districts and running for Congress again, that we're taking that opportunity to say, hey, I'm a cattle producer in your district, and here are the issues that are making it harder for me to grow and making it harder for me to hire and expand my business. Keep sharing those stories. Keep making sure that you're engaging and taking that opportunity. Don't assume somebody else is doing it. And quite frankly, keep engaging with your state cattlemen's association, with your county cattlemen's association, with us at NCBA. Participate in that process. I keep telling people, don't get mad, get involved and share your opinion and make sure that your voice is part of those solutions, so that when we go to Congress, when we communicate what this industry needs to be successful, we're really speaking for as many producers as possible and putting the best and brightest ideas forward. Yeah,
that's great advice. And I have one last question for you. Why are you so passionate about these issues that affect producers?
You know, I grew up in the quarter horse world, and my family has quarter horses and cattle, and I'm from a ranching background. I started my career buying ranches. This is you know, like a lot of us in agriculture in Washington, this is where I'm from. You know, when something goes wrong in the cattle business, the first call I usually get is from my parents asking me what I screwed up. You know what I mean? And so these issues hit home. You know, everyone gets passionate in Washington. That's why everybody, you know, who comes here puts up with all of the grief that it takes to live here, so that you can be involved in these conversations. But boy, it hits home. And when you have family that are involved and it's your way of life, it means a little more. So, you know, you really want to make sure that you do the best for them here in Washington. You represent them to the best of your ability. And sometimes, you have to fight in a town that is kind of geared against us. And so some days we're making friends, and other days we're putting our helmet on and going to battle. And that's there's no one I'd rather do it for. It's fulfilling work, even on days when you're frustrated.
Right. Yeah. And thank you for doing that. Right. We need these voices.
Well, and thank you for getting the message out. I mean, it's so critically important that these kinds of programs are out there so that producers get that full picture of what's happening. So the work you guys do is absolutely invaluable.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Ethan. I really appreciate your input.
You bet. Happy to be here.
And thanks to everyone who's watching or listening. If you want more information, the links are provided in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube and Rumble. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much and have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to today's Ag Spotlight episode, where we put the spotlight on people and companies doing great things for the agricultural industry. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcasting platform, and give us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on YouTube and Rumble to see the video version of Ag Spotlight. Also, head on over to NorthAmericanAg.com to subscribe to our Industry Connect update newsletter. If you're interested in advertising opportunities, email us at connect@NorthAmericanAg.com. Thanks for listening.